Hello and welcome to the Parent Footprint Podcast with Dr. Dan. I am Dr. Dan, your host. Let me tell you a little bit about Parent Footprint. Our mission is to make the world a more loving and compassionate place, one parent and one child at a time. At Parent Footprint, we truly believe the key to raising happy, healthy, and engaged kids is for us parents to do the same, to seek our own happiness, health, engagement, and of course, awareness. We believe that awareness is the foundation of your personal vision of successful parenting, and with increased awareness and intention, we can be purposeful about leaving a healthy footprint on our children. Today's show is called Shifting Boys' Behavior Through Connection. I am very pleased to introduce you to our guest, Tosha Schore, who is a parent coach, speaker, and co-author with Hand in Hand parent founder Patty Wipfler of Listen, 5 Simple Tools to Meet Your Everyday Parenting Challenges, which we'll be talking about today. Tasha's a mom to 3 boys and an advocate for boys and their families worldwide. She's committed to creating lasting change in families and in the world by supporting parents to care for themselves, connect with their boys deeply, set limits lovingly, and play wildly. Tosha has a bachelor's in women's studies and language studies from UC Santa Cruz and a master's in applied linguistics from UCLA, and she is a certified teacher and trainer of instructors in parenting by connection. Tosha, good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. I'm really excited to be here.
So we've been planning this for a while, and it's actually happening, and I know of your story because I've read about your story, but it'll be way better if you tell all of us about your story, how you came to do this work and this become your mission.
Yeah, so the boys bit came later. I mean, the bit about getting into parenting, I mean, as it's funny for you to hear you actually read my degrees in things that have seemingly nothing to do with what I do now. I'm like, oh yes, my women's studies and my linguistics and my language studies and all these things I haven't thought about in a long time. Actually, I do use them. But essentially what happened is I think what happens to a lot of people, which is that life takes you on a journey that's unexpected. And while I was expecting my boys, I wasn't expecting it to be as hard as it was. And I got to a point where things got hard enough that I wanted to seek out help. And I ended up finding a support group that was led by Patty Wipfler, who is my co-author on this book, right? And this is just sort of serendipity. I don't know what you want to call it. But anyway, it was very close to where I lived. I mean, on this entire planet, how that happened, I don't know. But I ended up going to a support group with her and that she led. And it just rocked my world. Like we used to hide out, essentially, it felt like that because it was like in this back office behind somebody's house, and there was like a group of maybe 5 to 10 of us, and every other week we would park on the street and we would sneak down the side of the house quietly and squeeze into this little small room and have this support group, and just amazing things happened there. I felt for the first time that I wasn't judged, that I could just be all of who I was in my glory and in my mess. And I also was able to learn from Patty these amazing tools that allowed me to shift the way that I parented and also shift the way that I cared for myself as a parent. So it just got to the point where I felt like I was able to turn my life around in such an amazing way that I felt like I had to help other parents do the same thing. And then the boys bit came later, and I think we're going to talk about that. So I'll probably save that.
Yes, it's all related and connected, of course. Okay, so first things first, why focus on boys?
Yeah. So I think this is probably best, it's probably easier for me to explain why I focus on boys by telling the story. And what happened was that one day I was sitting, kind of glancing over the newspaper. Don't worry, for those of you who have very young kids, my kids were a little bit older at this point. So I could actually sit after they went to school and with a cup of tea and look at the newspaper for 5 seconds. But what I noticed was that, the world was in a tight spot. Like there was just a lot of bad happening. As I scanned, there was literally, it was school shootings, rapes, murders. I mean, terror attacks. It was just one thing after the next. And they were all, at least that day, and mostly, they were all at the hands of men. And I thought to myself, what is going on here? I'm raising 3 young boys, and look at the newspaper. Look what's happening. They're growing up. A lot of, these men, not all men, obviously, but the people who are perpetrating this violence are mostly men. What is going on? And I had this aha moment that every one of these men, whether or not they had just like blown themselves up or shot 12 kids or whatever they had done, like every single one of them was born just like this sweet little boy. Like, what happened? Mm-hmm. And I suddenly had this idea that I really needed to go on a mission to connect parents of young boys with this amazing opportunity that we have to essentially allow them to grow into emotionally intelligent men. Like, there are things that we can do, that we don't have to like sit back and look at the paper and be hopeless and worry. Like, my clients, like, they come to me literally with like 3-year-old kids, like they're worried. They already have them like locked up behind bars. Right. I'm like, your kid's 3, right? I mean, but they're worried. That's how worried we are. And so I just felt like I wanted to make the connection to parents and say, like, for parents and say, like, look, we have an amazing opportunity. We can actually change the destiny. And I'm not naive. I'm not saying, okay, violence is going to end and the way we parent is the only influence upon these people. This is, it's not like we're going to end terror or school shootings or anything like that, solely by this. There are obviously like laws and societal shifts that need to happen as well. But we do have amazing power as parents. And I felt like I wanted to shift that around. I want my boys to grow up and not be reading that in the paper. I want to be reading about like them, I don't know, creating cool inventions or following their passions or being amazing dads or, I don't know, doing cool things.
So what did you do then? Like how? So it's like this is beautiful. Like backing out for raising these young innocent people. What did you start to do to develop these skills and principles to raise these healthy boys?
Yeah. So essentially what I did is I drew on my experience through these unrelated degrees, right? So I took, the brain science bits from linguistics, and I took when I was at UCLA, we taught undergraduate ESL courses. And so I had a lot of pedagogy courses and learning how to coach parents or coach adults and teach adults, sorry. And so I took like those skills, and then I went through the training program with hand-in-hand parenting and became an instructor and then a trainer of instructors. And that was really, that was the education path. I'm not sure if that's what you meant by the question.
Oh, yeah. And then, then these principles, of course, show up in your book, right? So there's so many good parenting books out there. I've got shelves of them in my office and at home, and I know all of my well-informed clients also have them. And yet, every book is a little different. Every book offers something else to integrate. What can you tell us about your book that makes it different? Because I know you have all of those parenting books as well.
Exactly. I do. So there are a couple of things that I feel like are real breaths of fresh air in Listen. The first is that we really don't talk about controlling emotion. Like most parenting books are like how to fix your kid. And how do we control the big feelings or make them stop? And what we talk about is really harnessing the power of those emotions to create change, if that makes sense. So we look at the emotional release process as a tool for discipline, really.
All right, so tell us. Tell us about that. Or keep going, but we definitely need to dive deeper about what that looks like. But you can go big picture first.
Okay, so big picture. I guess the other thing that I want to say about the book that I feel like is really unique is that, we support parents. Well, there's 2 other things that I want to say. So one is that we support parents, and this is sort of a part A and get part B, I guess. So one is that one of the 5 tools, it's Listen, 5 simple tools. So one of the tools is a tool called Listening Partnerships. And this is a tool that we teach parents by which they can support one another in this very important work of parenting. And what most parenting books do is suggest that you do a lot of things, but don't kind of take that step back and go like, oh my God, like I do with my clients. I go, I could tell you 29 things that you could do in this situation, but if you're totally triggered in that moment, you're not going to be able to do any one of them, right? This is like your parent footprint, right? Mm-hmm. So what we do is we offer actually a tool that helps parents figure out what their parent footprint is really, and heal from their own wounds, so that they can parent in a way that they feel proud of, and different from the way that they were parented if they're wanting to do that differently. And then the part B of that in the We Support Parents is that we really lay out, and Patty wrote this chapter, I just love it at the beginning, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's essentially looking at parenting as work. And what it does is it actually takes the blame off of us as parents. And so many of us walk around feeling guilty. Like, why are we having such a hard time? Why are we struggling so much? But in fact, we case this in a bigger framework of society. And when I say society, I don't just mean American society where you and I are right now, but I have clients all over the world. And it's the same thing. It's like, society isn't set up to support parenting as work. It's still a given that you just like do it. It's by the way, it's like treated like a hobby. There's no training. It's really not given the attention that it needs. I mean, if in a world where parenting were supported and valued, a parent, for example, wouldn't have to make a decision about staying, or choose between, let's say, staying home with a sick child or losing their job, right? I mean, it's, it's like, okay, this isn't right here. If a child's sick, then we should be in a society where a parent is able to stay home and care for that child. That seems important. They shouldn't be at risk of losing their job or getting a bad review or something like that. So those are the ways I feel like our book differs. Aside from the fact that the tools really there are only 5 of them, and they're really simple, and essentially they're all just different ways of listening. That's the title.
Yes, and it's simple and grabs, right? Because we don't often listen. I think that's fair to say. I think often when we're parenting, it's like a thing. It's an ing, and listening is that passive thing that I think we all can really do more of with our kids.
Less is more for sure.
Right.
I think a lot of the time.
So harnessing the power of emotions for change, right? Because you're right. We're like, oh no, meltdown, emotion. Like, how do we stop this? How do we divert this? How do we squelch it? How do we overpower it? But no, that's not what you're talking about.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. So I can talk about just some examples maybe of how you can really use just listening to discipline. And discipline is really like teaching, right? We want to teach our kids. We want to teach them emotional intelligence, right? We want to teach them flexibility. We want them to be able to function as adults in the world, and not just function, but thrive. We want them to be able to not let fear hold them back, for example. We want them to be able to go after their dreams and to be respectful in that, not trample upon others while they're doing that. So these are all things that we want for them. So what does that look like in the life of a parent of a young boy? So let's just take an example. So let's say, I don't know, you've got a 3-year-old who, and it's dinner time and you made spaghetti. Okay. You made spaghetti and meatballs. And there's sauce and meatballs, and you make the spaghetti and you make the sauce and you pour the sauce on the spaghetti and you mix it all together and you serve it, and you guys sit down to dinner, and your kid, your 3-year-old, just totally flips out. I don't want sauce on my spaghetti. I hate sauce, right? And he's flailing and he's crying and he's having a big upset about it. And there, we always have options in these moments, right? You could say, and I always like to say to parents, I want you to sort of take stock of where you are in this moment. Are you at a place where you can patiently listen? Or would it be easier to just offer some spaghetti without some sauce and take the opportunity to listen will present itself again soon. You haven't lost the opportunity, right? So you want to take stock of what's going on with you for sure as a parent. But let's just say that you're in good shape and there's no more spaghetti without the sauce because you've poured it on. So where does the opportunity come in? The opportunity comes in with actually just moving in close using a tool we call stay listening. This is rocket science here, right? Stay listening. You stay and you listen. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but not much. Okay. So you would move in close to that child, and rather than try to fix it or make a separate meal or convince them that they should like it or that it's okay or anything else, or that they should be quiet, you can just move in close and listen, get down to their level, preferably even below eye level. You might put a hand on them. You might not if they don't want to be touched. You don't need to be forcing yourself upon them for sure. And you just listen. You don't have to say anything at all. And when people are new to this practice, I actually suggest that they don't say anything, because most of us are so good at like blah, 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 blahing. And it's mostly just for us, not for them. It doesn't really help the healing process. But what happens is this amazing thing. If you can just move in close and listen, is that he will cry and cry and cry and tell you how he hates you and how he hates spaghetti and he's not going to eat it and everything, whatever, on and on and on. And he'll cry and he'll shake and he'll kick or whatever. And as you just keep him safe and keep everyone safe. And probably after not very long, he will calm down. And you know that you can have that image. I think most of us as parents have that image where after a big cry, your child will take that big kind of shaky breath. That kind of a shaky breath thing, and calm. And when that happens, after that happens, what you see is that he will sit down and eat the spaghetti. And I see this happen over and over and over and over again. And so when I say, harnessing the power of emotions to shift behaviors, this is what it can look like, right? Here's a kid, he hates spaghetti and he won't, and it's not about is it true or it's not true. It's not about, changing the dinner or making more work. All you have to do is actually, it's easier than you think. You don't have to do all those things of trying to fix it, which is so much work. Instead, if you just move in and listen, like, the body will naturally move through its resistance and its upset. And the upset probably had nothing to do with the spaghetti in the first place, right? And then he moved through it, and then he can just eat. And there you move on. So that's an example of how you could just do less. You could just listen. And 5 minutes later, you're sitting at the dinner table, rather than what most of us do, which is we start, saying, if you're going to cry, you need to go, in the other room, or, come on, like, you like this. And we start negotiating with them, and then we get into an argument and we get more and more upset, and dinner blows up and everyone's in a bad mood, and it takes an hour.
Know how that, we all have, we all know that one real well.
Exactly.
So I'm going to represent the critics out there.
Please do.
So if you do that and you listen, then aren't you just allowing the behavior and telling them it's okay to act like that? And how do you let them know it's not okay?
Oh, Dr. Dan, I love this question.
I've never heard that one before. Yeah, right. So.
Yeah. Well, this is what I say to parents. Let's take another example, because I get this a lot, like with siblings that are fighting, right? One kid's like the particular aggressor, or more of the aggressor, and the other is more of the quote unquote victim, right? The one child's hitting the other one. Okay. How do I, if I just, hold them back and don't punish them for it, how are they going to know, that it's not okay to hit their brother, right? So I say, dear parent, if I were to ask you right now, do you think, Johnny thinks it's okay to hit his brother? That parent will tell me no. Never, ever, and all the parents that I ever worked with, has anybody said, no, my kid thinks it's okay to hit his brother, or throw the fork, or, call me words that I won't say on your podcast. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they know it. Kids are smart. They do know right from wrong. So that really isn't an issue. That's really more for us. And it has to do, I feel, more with our embarrassment and our shame that comes up for us when our kids behave in ways that aren't sort of accepted by society. So I feel like that's like a different issue. I don't feel like we need to teach kids in that way. We are not, by listening to them, teaching them that it's okay to have a tantrum about spaghetti, because what you will notice is, if you do that a few times, the more that you listen, the more flexible that child becomes about what they eat for dinner. So the reality on the ground of what I see over and over again just doesn't support that fear. That's a fear. And the reality just doesn't support it. The more you listen, the more flexible kids become, whether it be about food or anything else.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Hey y'all, it's Caitlin and Kane Brown here with Wayfair. As a growing family, one of our favorite things is Game Night Wayfair Edition.
Let's do it. You got to name as many Wayfair furniture and decor categories as you can. Ready? Go.
Sofas, bar stools, beds, ottomans, outdoor seating, bookshelves, kitchen tables, garden sheds, mid-century modern lamps.
Time. Nice. You got 9 out of a lot. Not too bad. Keep practicing by visiting wayfair.com, where you can shop every style for every home.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
So how about, given that we are both raising teenagers and we know that the challenges just change from those young kids to these older people, how can you give us an example from a teenager perspective about harnessing the power of emotions to shift behavior?
Ooh, this is so interesting. Okay. I don't work with teenagers at all. I only have my own. So this is all like personal stuff. I work with parents with young kids, but yeah, I mean, I use it all the time in my family. So let's think.
I'm sure you do. Yes.
Yeah. So let's think of an example. So one will have to do with cell phone rules, let's say.
Oh, there's one. There's a universal one for all of us parents. Yes. Right.
So in our house, cell phones aren't allowed in the bedroom. Okay, they're not allowed. They stay downstairs. They don't go upstairs in bedrooms. And our teenagers don't like that rule, and generally they're respectful of it, but sometimes not. And recently we had an issue where like one of my kids had his phone in there, and it was in there all night, and I was not cool with it. So I brought that limit. The next day I said, hey, that's not cool. Like, we've got a house rule. We all respect it. And the phone needs to stay downstairs. And he essentially had what is the equivalent of the 3-year-old spaghetti tantrum, but, a teenage tantrum. It just looks different. It's louder and bigger and stuff. But essentially it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I just listened and did not, the same thing I would coach a parent of a young child to do. I didn't engage in a negotiation about it in that moment, because what's happening in the brain at that time is that he's flipped his lid, right? Like his prefrontal cortex, where all his abilities to think and plan and cooperate and all the yummy things we like, right? There was nowhere to be found. There was no teachable moment there. And I knew that. So rather than going down that rabbit hole, I just listened, and I just said every once in a while, like, I get it. I hear you want it up there, but there are no phones in your room. But that's not fair. Nobody else has that rule. Every single person I know, like, that is the stupidest rule. You guys are so strict. The whole thing. And yep. I just listened and occasionally I'd slip and I'd go like, really? Like, we're that strict? And he's like, nobody else has that rule. And I go, okay, wait a minute. That was just for me, right? Not for me. But it's just listening. And then what happened is that the next day, he came down and he said, I'm sorry. Like, I get it. But you know what? Like, can we talk about this rule? Because I get it on the weekdays where I have a hard time getting off it, and then I'm up super late, and then it's hard to get up for school. I get that. But like, on the weekends, can we talk about if I can have it up there on the weekends? And then it's like, oh, yeah, we can talk about that. Let's talk about that. Let's figure out what makes sense. That's reasonable. Like, yeah, let's think about, and then he could ask me reasonable questions. He could say, well, why is it that you don't want it up there? What are the reasons? And we could have a conversation. Well, if that's your reason, then maybe we can shift the rule. So, but my point is that conversation happened later, in this case, the next day. You can't have that conversation. The ones that we're trying to have in the heat of the moment, those aren't meant to happen in the heat of the moment, because our brain is in no place to have them. It's set up to fail because it's just running on emotion.
That's a great example. And I mean, this discussion is in my office every hour. I mean, several times a day, professionally, and it's in our home with my wife on a regular basis as well. So again, what you're bringing this back to is you're not punishing, you're not yelling, you're not running out and changing something. You're starting with listening and actually respecting the person's natural human reaction to disappointment or upset.
That's right. Yes. And this is really important. I'm really glad that you said this, because this is the bit about boys that I feel like is really, really important. We start shutting down their emotions from such an early age, right? They're left with anger. It's like, great. Well, no wonder they're like shooting up and whatever, getting in fights and doing all these things. I mean, we haven't left any room for them to feel that big rainbow of emotions that we do let our girls feel still. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like, for example, there was one time when one of my kids who was playing soccer and he got cleated. I mean, that hurts. Cleats hurt.
Right.
And he started crying, and, it's just sort of an immediate reaction. And like, that's what your body does. It wants to heal. That's how our body heals from hurt. And his coach essentially said to him that he needed to get it together, or he wouldn't be able to play the next game. Well, I had to talk with that coach, but because if you think about it, like, and I had to talk, when I mean that in the friendliest of ways, I love that coach. And I say that, and like, he was doing what we do. Like, it's what he knows. It's like what he grew up with. It's not because he's a bad person at all. He's awesome, but he needed some education. He didn't know, because a girl, he would have just patted on the back and say, hey, sit down for a few minutes and then like come back in when you're feeling better or something like that. But no, like, it's scary for us to see our boys emote. We still see it as weakness. And I said to that coach, you know what, if you had just like let him have like the 30 seconds to just cry and release that stress, he would be back on the field way faster than what just happened.
Right.
Like, he could get back up, but like, he just needed to have that release. So we want to, from a very young age, stop shutting down these feelings. We get scared. And I think we get scared for different reasons. And I see this I work with a lot of dads and a lot of moms. And I see that it oftentimes plays out in a stereotypical kind of way. For a lot of moms, there's a lot of fear that comes up, especially when their boys are struggling with like bigger aggressive behaviors. Because many of us, even most of us, as we know from the Me Too movement, most of us women like have violence in our past that was perpetrated by men, right? So we are triggered in those moments, especially as our boys get bigger. But it's often even disproportionate. Like, I have, moms will say, well, but he's 4, but he's really big. And I'm like, and I'm like, like, that's fear, because you're 35 or 40 and you're bigger, and we can help him through this, but not if you're terrified of him. Right?
Well, and this Well, and this brings me. Sorry, finish up. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing about that I see in dads, and then I'll stop blah blah blah. But because one thing I see in dads is, and I totally get, is that I think that sometimes what happens for them is they feel like if they let their son emote in this way in public, that they're going to be shamed in ways that they were. In other words, they learned that there are repercussions to showing emotion, especially the ones that are labeled feminine emotions, in public. So they are protective, and I totally get that. They are protective. They don't want their boys to be vulnerable in that way.
Well, so thank you for saying that, and I'm glad I didn't cut you off before you said that, because it totally connects to this next question, which is in your book, is in your philosophy, and totally aligned, as you know, with Parent Footprint, in knowing ourselves and what we're bringing to this business, this work of parenting. And so, you talk about how healing from one's own wounds. And so say a little bit about, please tell us, like, how do we get in touch with where we came from and how that's impacted us so we can parent in a way that's healthiest for our kids?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the tools that we teach in the book is called listening partnerships. And essentially what it is creating a situation that's like a stay listening situation. Remember, I talked earlier about with the spaghetti, so we'll just like stay and we'll listen to him. So what we do is we help parents set up dyads where they listen to one another And as you get better at it, you can be more strategic. But essentially, it's a safe space for us to explore our triggers and our histories. And so what it could look like would be, let me just think of an example because it's easier to understand through like a story. So let's just keep going with the spaghetti thing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say the spaghetti situation didn't play out the way that I suggested, but instead went the way it usually goes, which is that, I went and I made something else and I was really annoyed and I was sort of like slamming the pot down as I was boiling new spaghetti without sauce, and I was feeling resentful and my kid's going to be spoiled brat and all these things that were coming up for me. And so afterwards I sort of pull myself together and think, okay, I was triggered in that moment. Like that was like not a very adult way to respond. Like I'd like to do it differently next time. I'm going to take this to my listening partnership. And the first thing that I would do is I would probably just play out what happened, and I would just rage about how I felt towards my child. Like and that might be like, I hate when he does that. It's like, I do this meal, he says he likes it. I make this because he likes it. And then the last second he changes his mind and whatever, but I get to vent, but in a safe space where I'm not hurting my child, right? Because it's not spewing out at him. But I have a person and their job is to just listen. So they're not giving me advice and they're not trying to make me feel better and whatnot. But they might guide me later on as they get more advanced with a question like, what would have happened when you were a kid if you had a tantrum like that about a meal that you didn't want to eat, for example? Mm-hmm. And that then is kind of a guiding question that might jettison me back to a place where I could work on an early hurt that is likely being triggered in that situation, right? So it might be that, it might be that we didn't have enough food, or it might be, who knows what it was. There are lots of we're all triggered in different ways. But my point is that in that situation, then I can go back and feel whatever feelings actually were the original feelings that are now getting triggered. And as I heal from those, and I might cry, I might rage, I'm actually really moving through the emotions, not in a acting kind of a way, but as they emerge, if they emerge. And I'm, this for some people, emotions come really easily. And, as you can guess, for women, usually they're able to get to those emotions much more quickly than men are, but men also can and do learn to access them as well. And some men have full access to them in a really short amount of time. But we go back there and we work on the early hurts. And I'll just give you an analogy, which I think speaks to people a lot. I think of it as like, if there's a stack of books, right? If there's sort of a stack of ways that we've been hurt in our lives that are stacked up like books, and then as we move through our days and we get triggered in different ways, we can kind of work on, we can take the top book and go oh gosh, I really felt triggered today when my kid didn't eat the spaghetti with the meatballs. Let me work on that issue. Okay, working on that, take that book off. And then the next book is well, yesterday he got all annoyed because he wanted to wear his Vans, but they were wet because he'd been in the puddle the day before. So he couldn't wear them and he had a whole, whatever. I'm going to work on that one. And we pull it down, or we work on our early hurts, which is that bottom book. And then we just yank that bottom book out of the pile, out from underneath the pile, and the rest of them fall, if that makes sense. So we work on our early hurts and then we're not so triggered in the day to day. And
it takes a lot of courage to take that book on the bottom. We all know.
It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. But the rewards are, amazing. The rewards are absolutely amazing.
So I know we're just scratching the surface here, and yet it is already time for the parent footprint moment question.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. I have so many more things I want to say.
No, so this will be part one. This is part one, and we will do a part two. Okay. All right. Here it is. Parent footprint moment question. Tell us about a time when you became aware of yourself as an individual or a parent, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your child.
So the story that I want to share has to do with a time when we had to make a really hard decision about pulling our boys out of a school. And what happened I won't go into the details, but what happened was that it became clear that the school wasn't able to see one of my boys for who he was. They weren't able to see his goodness anymore. They could only see his struggles, and like they had labeled him as those struggles. Mm-hmm. And it got to a point where we had to say goodbye. And the kids didn't want to leave the school, and it was very hard. But I felt like I wanted to model integrity for my kids. And I wanted to show them that they could and they deserved to be with people who would see their goodness always and allow them to make mistakes and help them grow from them. And to explain to them, I remember saying this to them. I said, you know what? Imagine like there was like a clothing store that you really loved. And you just you always wanted to buy your jeans there, let's just say. And you always went there and the best selection and the most awesome styles, and everyone was wearing them. And then you found out that they donated a percentage of their proceeds to, a cause that you felt was a really, really bad cause, like a white supremacist cause or something like that, that was really against your values, something that was against your values. Okay. What do? I feel like the right thing to do is that I have to stop buying my jeans there, because even though I love those jeans, I can't support that. And I was like, you know what? We need to be in a community that shares our values, that believes that everybody is good, that everybody is doing their best at all times, and that is our job as parents and educators to be able to find the way to help these kids through. And I want you guys to be in a place where people can see that. And that felt like, to me, a real parent footprint moment.
Mm-hmm. And how did they take that? Once they processed that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard move. I mean, it was leaving it was a community that we had built over 8 years. It was really starting anew. It was scary. But what I'll say is that at the end of the following year, where they were all in different schools, one of my boys came to me and said, "That was the hardest and best year of my life."
Nice.
Yeah, that kind of says it all.
Nice. And it is really hard when we have to do what we believe is right for ourselves, for our family, and for our kids, and we know it's going to be a hard thing to do, right?
Yes.
And, kudos to you. Not an easy thing to do.
Not very hard. It was a very hard. Yep. And there have been many, but I noticed that they bring us to better places always. So as hard as they are, as long as we don't let fear drive us, we're doing well.
Do not let fear drive us, everyone. Concluding remarks from our wise guest, Tosha Schore, who is the co-author of Listen, 5 Simple Steps to Meet Your Everyday Parenting Challenges. Tosha, thanks so much for sharing. I think the tip of the iceberg about raising healthy boys to go out in the world and do good and stay away from all the atrocities that you mentioned at the beginning of the show. We clearly have much more to talk about. Until we do that, please let everyone know where they can find all of your work.
Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is toshashore.com. That's probably the best place to find me. Or you can find me on Facebook. That would be my social media of choice. Tosha Schore, your partner in parenting boys.
Tosha is your partner. All right, Tosha, thanks so much. We will be talking again soon, I know. Everyone, thank you for listening to the show today. Take these words from Tosha to heart. The number one word, listen. Listen to your kids. Listen to your boys. Check us out at www.parentfootprint.com. You can find our stuff there, our parent footprint awareness training, as well as the other podcasts with our wise guests and colleagues. Now, as you go on into the world, go on to your day, remember it is key to try to be the person you want your child to become. They're always watching. They're always listening. They're absorbing from us. Ask yourself the question I try to ask myself and live up to every day. What footprint do you want to leave?